We are live and recording. Happy Friday, everyone! We have such a fun event in store for you. I am so excited. If anyone has talked to Kelly, our store manager, about middle grade, you have heard about these authors. And I am very excited to get to introduce to everyone Lincoln Peirce, Judd Winick, and they're going to be in conversation with our amazing guest moderator of the night, John Gallagher. Now I'm going to pass it off to John in just a second, but I'm going to read everyone's bio just to give you a little introduction to all of the authors for tonight. And you really are in for such a treat. You're going to actually get to see artists draw, which is just so freaking cool. I'm really excited about that. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm super excited about that. Plus the fact that these stories are just so fun and amazing, and I know that they've brought smiles and joy to a lot of our readers in the store. So we'll get the formal introductions over and then we'll pass it off. So Lincoln Peirce is a New York Times bestselling author and cartoonist. His comic strip Big Nate appears in over 400 newspapers worldwide and online at gocomics.com/Big Nate. In 2010, he began a series of illustrated novels based on the strip, introducing Nate and his classmates and teachers to a new generation of young readers. In the past 7 years, 16 million Big Nate books have been sold. Woohoo! The New York Times best-selling MAX and the Midknights, which I know is one of Kelly's favorites, originated as an unfinished spoof of sword and sorcery tales. Returning to the idea years later, Lincoln rewrote the story around Max, a 10-year-old apprentice troubadour who dreams of becoming a knight. And I know we're celebrating book 2, I believe, tonight, which is super exciting. And then Judd Winick is the creator of the award-winning New York Times best-selling Hilo, another favorite at our store series. He lives in San Francisco with his wife, their 2 kids, and their cat, which if you are wondering about the name, I just have to explain this to everyone. If you are wondering about Judd's name, that is said cat. So it is in honor of the fuzzy. And let's see, Judd has scripted issues of best-selling comic series, including Batman, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Justice League, and Star Wars. Judd also appeared as a cast member of MTV's The Real World San Francisco, throwback, yes, and is the author of the highly acclaimed graphic novel Pedro and Me, about his real-world roommate and friend, AIDS activist Pedro Zamora. Is that how you correctly say his last name? I want to make sure.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yep.
Perfect.
Indeed.
And then John, our amazing host for the evening, is the art director of the National Wildlife Federation's Ranger Rick magazine and has been drawing comics since he was 5. John is also the co-founder of Kids Love Comics, an organization devoted to using graphic novels to promote literacy, and leads workshops teaching kids how to create their own comics. John lives in Virginia with his wife and their 3 kids. And I'm going to pass it off to John, but I also just have to give like a huge shout out because I feel like it's a theme I've seen in a couple events of how awesome it is that graphic novels are having this great comeback with kids literacy, because it really engages them and is getting them to read more. So just a big thank you for working on that and for putting that out there and promoting it, because it's super awesome getting to see kids actually excited about reading. And everyone, you know, the chat is to the right-hand side. If you have a question, you have these authors and illustrators at your mercy. So make sure you take advantage of that and ask questions down below. And also, the best way to support these amazing artists is to purchase their work. So if you would like to purchase any of the books from tonight's authors/illustrators, please make sure you click the purchase book button down below. Yes, all of the pointing. John's got it. John's got it. Okay, John, it is in your hands, and I will see you guys at the end of the event.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Well, welcome, Lincoln. Welcome, Judd.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It is a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm. You know, for the fans out there, I'm, you know, doubly excited because I am not only a creator myself, but I am a huge fan of both Lincoln and Judd's work, and so it's very exciting for me to be part of the talk tonight. Starting with you, Lincoln, could you tell us a little bit about? You know, I think a lot of people already know you from the Big Nate books and are huge fans. I have both your books. I've read both of them. And could you tell us a little bit about the newest Max and the Midnights, Battle of the Bodkins?
Yes. So I wrote the original Max and the Midnights a couple of years ago, and I thought I was writing it as a one-off, just sort of as a change of pace after working on the Big Nate novels for a lot of years. And I set it in the Middle Ages just because I wanted to create an adventure story, but that also had a lot of humor in it. And then as I worked on that book, I realized I really liked the characters. I liked the story and the setting. And so I said, I'm going to make this a trilogy. So Battle of the Bodkins is the second one. And it just basically picks up where book one left off. And in true sort of medieval swashbuckling style, you know, there's a big sort of adventure, and I know there was this expression back in the Middle Ages, odds bodkins, and so I actually thought of the title even before I started writing the book, and I thought, well, what could a bodkin be as an alternative to what it really means? I think someone told me that in Shakespeare, a bodkin is like a dagger or a knife. But that's not what a bodkin is in this book. A bodkin is something very different. It's sort of like a shapeshifter. And so so there's an adventure that's all about sort of the ability to sort of look like somebody else and act like someone else, and so all the characters are sort of having to figure out like who's who and what's what. So it's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. And I know we're going to have the two of you do some how to draw lessons here, show us how you draw one of your characters. But first, Judd, with Hilo, this is the 7th Hilo book, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
And it kind of changes up the focus a bit to Hilo's friend Gina. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. With the first 6 Hilo books, it has been Hilo has been our hero. And the first 6 books, when Hilo first comes to Earth, he crashes Earth and doesn't remember who he is, how he got here, that he has superpowers, or what he's supposed to do. And then with the help of his buddy DJ and Gina, he gets his memory back. He realizes he has powers. He fights this big giant robot named Razorwork. And then it all wraps up in the 6th book. And I'd say around the 3rd book, I started getting the idea of like, it'd be kind of fun if, around the 3rd book, it started really clicking in with me that this is more of a team book. That it's called Hilo, but it's about Hilo and Gina and DJ. It's really about the 3 of them. And like any good superhero team, sometimes you pivot. So starting with book 7, Gina is going to be our hero, and Hilo and DJ are going to back her up as we start a whole brand new story. So we're done with Razorwork, and Hilo's got his memories back. So whole new story, same character, same setting, same place, but just a new direction. And I'm thrilled and greatly relieved I thought of something.
Well, that's great. I mean, one of the things I love about both your books is the main characters, Max, and what started with Hilo, is they're very interesting, but what makes you care about all the characters is they each have their own unique needs and wants. But we'll get into that more in just a little bit. Maybe starting with you, Lincoln, would you like to show us how you draw one of your characters?
Sure. I will draw Max. Max is the main character. So,
and I'm not sure if there's a way for me to set this up so it's just you for this part.
I don't know either, but
you just start drawing. If we can make it happen,
we'll do the best we can. So I got my whiteboard here.
I feel like I should get out of the way, but that doesn't do any good.
Get out of the way, Judd. Give me room. So I know that the people watching won't mind that this is going to be kind of sloppy because, I always say that when I do the drawings for the books, of course, I sketch them out lightly in non-photo blue pencil to start, and then I go over them like really slowly and carefully in pen. And if I were to do that up here on the whiteboard, we'd be here forever because I'm not a fast worker. So right now you're just seeing the whole sloppy process from start to finish. So right now I'm working on the top of Max's head, the cap, the hair, back here, an ear, and then the bottom of the the face, a couple of eyes. It's just like a big number 11 in the middle of Max's face. Happy smile, some freckles, and there you go. Max from Max and the Midknights.
Nice. And would you say this is the same style? Like, are you following the same style you use for starting with the Big Nate series?
So I think you draw the way that you draw the way that you draw, I think. And so, I sort of set out to make characters that looked kind of different from the Big Nate characters, but they end up looking somewhat similar just because, that's how I draw. So,
right.
Max has the same kind of eyes, that Nate does. That's just how I usually just draw either 2 vertical lines or a couple of dots, pretty simple. So, so I try to change up. I try to add some variety to the look. And certainly there's a difference in terms of the clothing that the characters wear and the architecture and things like that, because it's set in medieval times. But yeah, I think you sort of draw how you draw, and you can't really escape that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think a lot of people, sometimes kids wrestle with, oh, I don't want to draw like that. And I think as artists, maybe we've all realized at some point, like, okay, that's how I draw noses, or that's how I draw eyes. Judd,
you gotta find your lane. Once you, that's what Lincoln. The idea that the book would be drawn in any other style but except your style. Like, no, don't do that. I'm also of the mind, like, Lincoln, I don't want to see you draw any other way. Forgive me. It's like I want it, and it isn't just like the familiarity of it. It's just sort of like that's your storytelling. That's kind of what I want to see. But it's true. You can't. I think Burke Breath had referred to it when he returned to comic strips by doing Outland. It was Outland. It was gonna be a whole different thing, and then after a while, it was just Bloom County again. But they called it Outland. I think he just said, "Yeah, like the wildebeest returning to the old watering hole. You just go with what you know and what's familiar, and it just always winds up. You do what you do."
Exactly. It was Outland, starring all the characters from Bloom County.
Yeah. No, and I honestly feel like Max is very much like it's Max starring the characters of Big Nate in costume.
Right,
it's it's sort of like, okay, no, we're doing a new program, same actors, just we're casting different roles. That's actually what my kids thought when Max first came out. They're wondering, like, is this supposed to be Big Nate? But they're like, are they doing it like a play or something? It's like, no. This is just like, get out of your head. It just looks I think because they've been reading Big Nate for so long, and to see a new story from you in the same style, it didn't click at first. But I think it's great. And as an endorsement, I've read the second one. If you guys haven't read it yet, it's so great. It's terrific. The story progresses such a terrific way.
Thank you.
And I don't want to give anything away. I don't know for how much we're spoiling.
Well, I wasn't going to give away about what a bodkin was at first, because I actually had to look it up because I remember in British writers class reciting the lines from Shakespeare where it says something about a bare bodkin, and I honestly kind of always thought it was like a bare butt. I don't know what. So I finally did look it up today. After all these years, it was that important but I actually like your definition of a bodkin better. Makes a lot more sense. So Judd, would you be willing to show us drawing one of your characters from Hilo?
Yeah, I'll give it a try. I wasn't quite set up for this, so oh crud. So I'm gonna do it like this. I want to make sure. Okay, so we're in frame.
Live.
Okay, and what I dig, Lincoln, you draw this like me. None of this stuff like you're tracing your own work. Okay, you've been drawing Max for how long? I still, as you'll see, like working it out, sketching it out, doing your shapes. That's how I do it too. So with Hilo, is that showing up? It's not. I'm gonna get a thicker marker. Okay, here we go. Hang on. All right. I do something similar where I kind of carve it out as well. It is not like I am tracing. And I always advise kids when they're drawing, they should do it loose, just like Lincoln was talking about that we do it with invisible blue pencil. I do the same thing. So this is sort of how I would be doing it if I were doing it in pencil. Because as a kid, well, for one, there's two things. One, when I was a kid, I'm sure we can both attest to it, we always used to get those terrible how to draw books. And it would be like, draw a circle, then draw another circle, then 2 triangles on top, then fill in everything else and make it look like a cat. Step 4, draw the rest. So that's why I always tell kids, like, it's always sort of important to keep it loose, do shapes, because it's supposed to be fun. It's never actually supposed to be a chore. And again, John and Lincoln can back me up on this. Drawing is the fun part of what we get to do.
For sure.
Coming up with the stories, kind of a drag.
Kind
Not
of
a lot of fun.
torturous. Yeah.
Oh, just I tell kids that if they have other authors visiting their schools and they tell them how much they love writing, how much they just dig looking at that blank page and tackling it, they are probably just lying to you. The writing's the worst. The drawing and rewriting, that's the best part. Okay, and with that is Hilo. And it's kind of a reversed image, but okay, I'm going to get close now. And there we go. And that's Hilo.
Great.
A tad messy, but that's how we do. That's how we start.
Hold on, let me.
And we'll take requests. If anyone want me draw a duck eating soup or something, or
Don't say that, Judd. Don't say that.
Chicken with
a have you ever been at like a book signing or something like that where maybe you're drawing or you're in some sort of setting where you're drawing for kids, and they'll come up to you and say, "Can you draw like Princess Jasmine from Aladdin?" Because they think like you're a cartoonist. Of course you can draw. And I'm like, actually, no. I have no idea.
I would need reference.
I have no idea.
Do you have any reference on you? A little something I can look at? Maybe you can push it up on your phone. And I should tell you, it's going to look bad because I've never drawn Princess Jasmine before.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd say the biggest problem I've ever run into, I was going around with Jeffrey Brown, cartoonist Jeffrey Brown one time. And I told this funny story about a guy at a comic convention who wanted me to draw a pig dressed as Batman. And sure enough, when we got to the Q&A, we also had an easel there. Like, can you draw a pig dressed as Batman? Like, oh, okay, we'll draw a pig dressed as Batman. And then it was, can you draw Superman as a chicken? Like, okay. So when we're up to our 12th drawing of the gorilla, dressed as the Flash, we're saying, okay, it's the last one. Last one. We're not doing any more superheroes as animals.
Right.
Sorry, we digress.
I've done a bunch of school talks, and it is always a sort of a battle because I'll say, now I know what's coming. So I'll say, okay, so, I'll answer questions, but, if you ask me if I can draw something, I'm going to tell you yes, but I am not going to draw it for you. So, because exactly, it's like, can you draw Wonder Woman? I can, but I'll remind them like, well, you can too, but it'll look like you're Wonder Woman. Yeah. But so, you mentioned that about the how to draw books. Lincoln, how is it that you started to draw cartoons and comics, and what were there any inspirations? And then did you look at how to draw books, or did you just sort of duplicate what you saw?
I learned by copying. There were no cartooning classes back then, anything like that. And so, I'm 57 years old. I think many cartoonists my age would cite Peanuts as just a hugely formative influence. Peanuts was everywhere back then. And so, yeah, I practiced by drawing Charlie Brown and Snoopy. That's how I started. And basically, I feel like at this stage in my life, I can draw okay, but, I was never the sort of kid who would keep working and working on drawing something until I had it mastered. No, I would get easily frustrated. So if I were trying to draw a race car, I'd try it once. Maybe I'd try it twice. It would look horrible. And then I would just decide, you know what? I can't draw race cars. There goes that idea. So I had sort of a limited repertoire, I would say. And And even when I started cartooning professionally, I look back at the early Big Nate strips. The strip's been going for 30 years. And when I look at the strips from the first few years that it was being published, I'm sort of horrified because I couldn't draw very well. So I've just sort of over time gotten better, but better within a very narrow range, I would say. I still can't draw race cars. There are just things that I just can't draw, so I don't try to draw them.
Right. How about you, Judd? Was there one main influence as you were getting started?
Yeah. Well, I'm laughing because so I'm 51. So my frame of reference was, of course, it was always Peanuts because it was always there. But Garfield was actually the one that knocked me on my butt when I guess I was about 8 or 9 when it came out. And Lincoln, I guess you were like a teenager. You were just like a little bit older. It's just a generational thing just right there. Garfield, I thought was the funniest dang thing, probably because he was just so mean. And the first time I actually started, and I started copying Garfield. That's what I did. I would draw Garfield over and over again until I could do it from memory. And at some point, I realized the same thing, that I can't really draw what a real cat looks like. But at the same time, Garfield doesn't really look like a real cat. I don't know if I was thinking it through, like the actual epiphany that, oh no, I'm a cartoonist. Drawing from life isn't necessarily my bag, but drawing things that are like really super stylized, I just love it. I too still can't. I don't draw cars or horses. Cars are hard, and horses are even harder. And cars are boring. But give me a cat to draw, I'm a happy guy. So yeah, I learned by copying. First Garfield, and then I think I graduated to copying Bloom County cartoons, and then superhero cartoons. I learned how to do a lot of anatomy and science fiction stuff by busting out the Fantastic Four and the X-Men and copying right out of there. Too often we hear about a lot of grown-ups, teachers maybe, who might tell kids that they shouldn't copy, they should just do their own stuff. And I think that's a lot of garbage. You should. That's how most of us learn how to draw. And still, the grown kids who are in art school and college, it's called master drawings. They go to museums with their sketch pads and they draw the paintings. We're not doing that. And it's a long stretch from drawing Garfield. But that's how you start. You learn how to do by, you're copying those shapes and you get those forms. And that's how I learned how to draw. And also discovered that I like doing funny cartoons, ones that make people laugh very early on. Right.
And that's, and that is, humor is so inherent in the work that you both do. One of the things I noticed that's sort of a parallel between this second Max and the Midnights and the Gina book is that it seems like Max and Gina are both dealing with friends that are maybe, I was thinking of it, it's almost like after the sunset, when the movie ends and everything's happy, things end up very well. And now Max is learning to be a knight, for instance, Lincoln, but some of Max's friends don't want to be knights. And that at one point it seemed like this is the way it's all going to work out. And that's seems like a really important part of the story, is that people are going to be who they are and maybe not. And with Gina, Gina Hilo has lost someone special to him and is acting a certain way, but it's maybe not true to how Hilo feels. So I just wanted to deal with or ask you about some of the more subtle things that come across, because we always talk about the humor, but really it's the heart behind it, I think, that makes a lot of your works special. So with Max and the Midnights, Lincoln, what sort of inspired that? Were you thinking of a particular situation that perhaps, like, Max's one friend decides to work with horses instead? And of course that means that Lincoln can draw horses better than we can, but we all
they're cartoony horses. Yeah, so one of the themes in the first Max and the Midnights book was these kids who don't necessarily have all that much agency in their own lives. Max is an apprentice troubadour, but has no interest in being a troubadour. Max wants to be a knight. And then Max meets this kid, Kevin, and Kevin has to work in his dad's stable. But what Kevin would really rather be doing is telling stories and writing books. And so I made that sort of a theme of the first Max and the Midnights book that, especially I think in medieval times, by no means am I an authority on medieval times, but I don't think kids were all that empowered back then to say, you know what I really want to do with my life? I want to do this. Probably that wasn't happening that much. You were apprenticed, or you were told this is what you're going to do. And then I wanted to sort of continue to play on some of those themes in book 2, which is sort of about like identity in more ways than one. Max has now identified as a knight, but then has this horrifying thought, like, what if I'm a lousy knight? What if this thing I've wanted to do all this time, what if I'm not good at it, And then, as you said, John, Max's friend Simon has decided, yeah, I thought maybe I wanted to be a knight, but I'm really good working with horses. So, and I love it. So that's what I want to be doing. And so, yeah, I think there's, when you have hundreds of pages to work with, like you do in a book, it's very different from my other gig where it's just a comic strip, 4 panels. But when you have a couple of 100 pages to work with, you can really sort of dive into some kind of deeper themes, and there's still plenty of room for the humor and plenty of room for the slapstick, but there's also some other things that you can weave in there.
Right. And that's something I really enjoyed with that. And, right down to there's a scene where there's a spell that duplicates books, and then that ties in with, a library that exists in medieval times. And, or I believe you actually, going into the humor, there's a whole story that's being told, and you refer to a fairy dog mother. And it's like, don't you mean godmother? And it's like, we didn't, you couldn't fix typos in medieval times. And, so it's that sort of thing, I think, keeps it going. And, with Judd, with Gina, it seems like there's a path Gina doesn't want to go down, but it's sort of being forced to. And, like the way she sees it. And, but at the same time, there's a level I know where Gina she's able to see things that no one else can see. And often it's the first time she spots something, it's the most ridiculous thing, like an elephant type creature flies by as they're having this conversation. And so, how is it that you balance the heart with the humor? Does that come naturally, or do you have to sit back and go, ooh, I got to add something funny here?
Well, jokes are always harder. I think everyone would attest to that. Like, a little bit of drama, you sort of like, it comes a little easier, but then try to like figure out a good joke. Jokes are always harder. But with this series in general, I was do Hilo and now with Gina. I think kids have a greater capacity to, understand very, very dramatic subjects. Sometimes we don't give them credit for it. That they can understand loss, and as well as they can understand things like hope and love and all your big ticket emotional items, both in storytelling and in life. I think kids have a good grip on that. And I was really pleased and proud when the first couple of Hilo books are coming out. And as much as the kids were talking about all the goofy jokes we might have made, they were also talking about the heartfelt stuff. And they really like that. They like how they're friends and how they stick up for one another. And they like how DJ doesn't seem to think he's particularly good at anything. That like resonated with them. They don't have the vocabulary to explain to me how much it means to them to do that. So I think when you do these stories, even though we're supposed to be doing these little funny books for the kiddos, I think you'll find in both of our books that they have these very dramatic through lines, and it's all about just sort of finding those sort of universal emotions. And it makes for a better story. But I think Lincoln's right. A lot of it is that you're doing big books and you have breathing room. So with that, it's sort of put upon us to tell a story. It shouldn't just be we're stringing together a bunch of goofiness and punchlines and whatnot. Tell a story, beginning, middle, and end. With that, the most important part of the story is character. It's after a while, it becomes easier to tell the stories because the characters kind of let you know. And I don't mean to be all artsy fartsy about it, but you do. After a while, the characters sort of tell you kind of where they want to go and where they need to be and what the story's supposed to be. It makes it easier when you build. Going back to Charles Schultz. Charles Schultz built the strongest characters in the world. Something that Linus would say would never come out of Charlie Brown's mouth, or Lucy, or Sally, or whatnot. The characters are what made it great. Once you get great characters, then you can pretty much do anything. And I think I made 6 different points in there.
No, I think that's a really good point, is that each character has their own voice. And sometimes they
That's what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Sometimes
that is exactly. That was my point entirely. Yes.
So we're about halfway through our talk, and there's some really great questions that have been thrown our way. I have one is aimed question for both of you, and we'll start with you, Judd, since I've been asking Lincoln first, and I don't want you to just steal his answers and say I was going to say that. So Judd, and then you, Lincoln. When you create your books, do you have an audience? I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. Do you have, they call you middle grade authors, but do you have an interest in creating other books? I think you may be letting people know about other books perhaps you've done or planning to do that are aimed at maybe a different age group. So
I just try to do all ages books. I try to do books like I kind of shoot for the same thing like a Pixar movie is always what I'm thinking about. I don't ever want it to, fly over someone's head if they're a young person, if they're a kiddo. But at the same time, I think I would just go crazy if the idea if an adult was reading it that they just thought it was garbage. Like, gosh, that's for kids. I'd prefer to actually have an adult occasionally stumble into Hilo and be happily surprised that there's a lot going on for them. I think what makes it all ages is more about like vocabulary, and maybe just no sex and violence, and you mind your vocabulary. And if you're telling sort of a straight ahead story, I think it always lands in that way. With that, I'm usually my audience is usually me. What I think is funny and cool is what winds up in the story. I don't think it ever happens that I've done something in a story like, yeah, I don't really think this is any good or like funny, but the kids will dig it. It's never been about that. It's usually, a lot is it. My first audience is me. It's for my own entertainment. And, occasionally, or when kiddos say like, I thought this part was really cool. Usually I have to fight the urge like I thought it was pretty cool too.
How about you, Lincoln? Is there an audience that you haven't written for yet? Or do you feel like, with Big Nate, you've been doing it for all ages, in the newspapers and online. Do you feel like you have other stories that you'd like to tell to a different age group?
I don't really think about stories in terms of the age group. Like you said, a comic strip is for all ages, and obviously most kids don't read newspapers, so they discover Big Nate through the book collections. And I'm always delighted when I meet adults who still read the comics pages, or frankly who still read newspapers because we all know newspapers are sort of struggling. But I think more than thinking about the age of an audience I'd like to write for, I think I would like to try just maybe another format, at a certain time. Like I've never done just a straight graphic novel. My books, I call them hybrids because they are a combination of graphic elements with text, and I sort of weave them together as best I can. But I've never done just a full-length graphic novel, and I've never done a full-length book in color, which I also think would be fun. So those are a couple of things I'm thinking about.
I would like to see both those things. As a fan, Lincoln, I would like to see both those things. I was going to sit here and be cool about it, but forget it. I would like to see you do a full-on, straight-up graphic novel and in color.
Thanks,
Just
Judd.
get a colorist too. Yeah, just don't even waste any time like trying to color it yourself. Just get a colorist and do it in color. It'd be so awesome. I would love to see that.
That's right. And Lincoln, you're working with you had someone help with the gray tones, I know, with your books. And did you find that brought in unexpected elements to the book that you didn't expect, or were you pretty tight with what you wanted?
So you're referring to my friend Tom Racine, who is a native San Diegoan out there. So we've known each other for several years, and I'll try not to make this story too long. I needed a little help. With, I just had too much work because I still do the comic strip full time, and I found that I was falling behind with my work, specifically when I would have to do the Photoshop stuff for the Big Nate comic strip, you know, coloring my Sunday page and formatting the daily strips. And I knew that Tom was a Photoshop master. And so I said, would you be willing to help me out with this? And he was happy to. So I was able to offload that part of the comic strip to Tom. And then when I started writing the second Max and the Midknights book, I said, well, Tom is awesomely talented, and I'll bet Tom could do a great job with the gray tones in Max and the Midknights, and he can do it in half the time that it would take me. And in answer to the second part of your question, yeah, Tom came up with a couple of really like fun sort of just visual effects that I would not have known how to do. You know, I just don't know my way around Photoshop in that way. So I think if you look at the two Max and the Midknights books side by side, there's a little bit more inventiveness and variety in the visuals in the second book because of Tom's input.
Right. That's well, I actually noticed. I mean, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, there's some really nice subtle things in the shadows and things I really enjoyed with that. And not to duplicate myself again, but Judd, the colors on this new Gina book are just incredible. And I know you've worked with a couple different colorists over the series of books. Have you colored yourself in these comics at all, or is it always been preferable to work with a colorist?
The quick answer is it's always been preferable to work with a colorist. They're just, my friends are better at it than I am, and work a lot faster than I am. I guess I could at this point, but I wouldn't even try. Currently, Marta Lejo is our colorist on Hilo 7 and forward, and oh my goodness, just makes me look so much more talented than I am. The colors add a whole new element to it that they can provide an emotion to the scene. I mean, moments like, I kind of want this to be dramatic. Can we have the lighting be a little bit lower and maybe a little more moody? And like, boom, there you go, moody and lower. And we want to talk about how color can create modeling and more of a three-dimensional effect for your kind of flat drawings, which my drawings are pretty flat. So I love it. It is the one thing I don't do in my books, and it's like Hanukkah and Christmas when the colors pages come back. Literally just before we clicked on here, Marta sent me about another 40 pages of book 8, and I had to fight every urge. It's like, just hang on a sec. We had all these monsters. I just want to see how they came out in the next book. And so it's the best. It's really, it's a little bit magical as far as I'm concerned.
That's great. And of course, as our audience probably knows, most if not all coloring is now done in Photoshop or in a program called Clip Studio. One of the questions we have from the group here is, how has technology changed for you? Are you changing with the technology, or is technology changing the way comics are being created in general? And I guess, what's your thoughts on that, Lincoln?
Oh my God. I'm a Luddite. I'm a technophobe. And I'm not even saying that as a joke. I mean, I literally am afraid of some of the technology. And I've always liked drawing with pen on paper. And I remember a number of years ago with the comic strip, I was still dutifully, drawing out my comic strips, packaging them up, taking them to FedEx and sending them to the syndicate in New York City. And one day they called me up and they said, you are a dinosaur. You're the last cartoonist we have that's still sending in your originals.
When was this? I have to know. What year was this when you were still sending them in and not scanning?
Oh, I don't know.
Up until when?
Early 2000s, 2006 maybe, or something like that.
Wow.
And they said, get yourself a scanner. And I said, how do I use a scanner? So anyway, they basically did an over-the-phone tutorial for me in how to use a scanner, how to scan my stuff. And at this time, I was still coloring my Sunday pages by Xeroxing the original and then using colored pencils with a little key code from American Color and sending that into the syndicate in person. They said, no, you're going to use Photoshop. So they had to teach me all this stuff, but it doesn't come naturally. I mastered the very specific set of steps I needed to do this one specific task. But if you ask me, Lincoln, can you whip up a birthday card for Aunt Marge on Photoshop? I'd be like, no, sorry, Aunt Marge, I don't know how to do that. So, and at this point, I'm too far along in my career to start drawing on a Cintiq, on a digital tablet. I'm just going to keep doing it the way I do it as long as I can. And if I have technology problems, I call the aforementioned Tom Racine, my collaborator, and I say, Tom, how do I do this, or help me out? And he does, and then we're good.
Oh, that's great. And as someone who reads comic books too, there have been periods when technology would jump up. I still remember there was a comic. It was the first computer generated comic called what was it, Shatter or something like that, and it was printed on a dot matrix printer. And the thing is, everybody's like, this is so cool. What they ignored was they were ignoring the fact that it was unreadable, in some way.
Not so cool. Really not.
Yeah, or some of the coloring. There was, Frank Miller is this great respected Batman artist, and I believe it was his wife at the time did color. It was her first computer job, and there's things that just look like 1980s desktop publishing color. So, I think there's something. I think
Lynn Varley was learning on the job, and by doing it, they're publishing it. It was really it was the Dark Knight sequel. It's right. I think the story's out there. I don't think we're talking out of school. Lynn Varley on The Dark Knight Strikes Back. She was learning how to color on a computer, and they were publishing it. It was, it was really something. Yeah, was very punk rock. It was interesting.
The designer in me was going crazy. It was one of those where I'm like, I just have to stop because I'll get too angry here. So, but Judd, you kind of, I'm 53, so we're all sort of in that mix, and so you were, I know, drawing traditionally at one point, but then when did you make the transition into digital?
Around I was an artisanal cartoonist. Pencil on paper. I would ink the 11x17 boards, erase my pencils because I didn't really like photo-invisible pencil at all. I didn't like the feel of it. Scan into my computer. I've been lettering on computer for a while now. But around the 5th Hilo book, Apple came out with the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil. I didn't like the feel of the Wacom tablets or Cintiq, but I tried the iPad. And so I did a rough draft of the book just on the iPad Pro to see how it would feel. And it felt okay. And I realized in doing it, because I wanted to do a book a year, I still want to do a book a year, I could save about 3 or 4 months of time if I draw on my iPad. It just goes a little faster in the editing, and the drawing goes a little bit quicker, and the fixes I need to make. And so I've been doing the last, so 6, 7, and 8 of Hilo has been on my iPad Pro, and I use an app called Comic Draw. I will say I miss paper. If you ask me, do I like drawing on computer better? I can be honest now, I do not. It goes a lot faster. I have all kinds of shortcuts, erasing and moving things around a little bit easier. But given my druthers, I would rather put a pencil to paper any day. I'm just doing it. I'm doing it because it's just more expedient. And at this rate, I have more ideas than I have time, and I need a little bit of the extra time. So I've yet to go like, oh boy, I just love drawing on my computer. I don't. Like just now drawing that little high-low on paper. That was probably the first time I've drawn on paper like in weeks, and it felt so nice. It just did. It just feels better. But yeah, this is go on.
Oh, I was just going to say that there's such a. I think you use the word hybrid to describe your books, Lincoln, and I think for people with our experience, don't want to say with our age, a hybrid is often what we use. Like I think with Max Meow, I drew the first 40 pages on tracing paper, then scanned it in, and then I'm a terrible inker on paper. Someone said at one time it looked like I was inking with a chocolate bar. So I just somehow I have more control on the computer, but it is one of those things where I often tell kids. I used to say, "Oh, always draw on paper to start." I it was just like as a graphic designer, always design your logos on paper. And at one point, I had to realize like a lot of these kids, this is just not the way they're thinking. I think there's magical things both ways. It's sort of like accepting that each generation has their own way. And
I do kind of feel they should start with paper. And maybe I'm just being the old guy. I really do. I mean, it's going to go the way of the dodo. I know it, but I do still feel like kids like who are going to start out by drawing on computers. Like no. I mean, a bad analogy would be you can't draw abstract until you've mastered how to draw realistically. Don't draw on your computer until you've learned to draw on pencil and paper. I think you need to build up those muscles because there's a lot of ways. I want to be honest. There's a lot of ways to cheat on on a computer that you can't cheat if you're just drawing on paper by hand. A lot easier to trace on different layers and stuff. So I think they should. I think you're right. They should start with paper.
Yeah, it's funny because with my kids and my youngest in school, he's like, "Why do I need to know algebra?" And when I was 13, I was like, "Why do I need to know algebra?" And I often said, like, "Look, a lot of this is learning the rules to learn how to break them later." And I do think with drawing on paper lets you feel what it's like when you can't hit undo. Like
yes,
right. I was doing a drawing and I actually thought in my head, undo. And I did 2 taps on the paper like you could do with an iPad.
I just have to break in here and say you don't need to know algebra. That's just.
I was going to say the same thing. You need to learn to draw on paper, but you definitely don't need algebra.
I'm doing fine with no algebra.
Right.
Look at us. We live like 10-year-olds. We make things up and then we draw them. That's our jobs. Okay. We don't need algebra. I mean, you got to get through algebra, kids. You got to get through algebra. But eventually, there's light at the end of the tunnel where possibly you get to make things up and draw them without algebra.
Right.
Exactly.
Through the hurdles, though.
It's almost like everybody has to learn how to deal with editors as creators. And there's just times you have to deal with hardship, and maybe the algebra is that setup for us. But I do say geometry has paid off. I don't know that. Yeah, algebra. There's parents all across America right now cursing us for saying this. Here's probably the most serious question of the night. Lincoln and Judd in a dodgeball game. Who would win, Max or Hilo? In a game of dodgeball.
Oh, Hilo. Hilo all day long. Hilo has superpowers. I mean,
right. He flies and can shoot lasers out of his hands. I feel like I'm like bragging, but it's just the construct of the characters we've created. Max lives in medieval times and has a sword. Hilo can fly and shoot lasers. It's just,
Right.
you know,
Right.
Max would have to outwit.
Windshield meet bug. I mean, that's, you know, that's a mismatch.
I do tend to think they would get along really well
They would, for sure.
as characters. I kind of like that they both have a level of optimism that I enjoy.
Yes, well, someone threw out, and wrote, but the bodkin, leather repels all. So I think they were trying to come up with we're really down to like a Star Trek versus Star Wars level of arguing here if we want to get that deep into it. Yes, so we're winding up. You know, if people have a few more questions they want to throw our way, and then if either of you, you know, is there something as you talk to young people, like what is it? These are some things that you've probably dealt with before, but Lincoln, I remember seeing a video of you at a school function, I believe, and you were talking about the universal icons related to comics, like word balloons and I just wanted to know, you know, what you think about, you know, what is it about comics? Like, do you think that comics are getting so absorbed into the culture that maybe they're losing their value, or do you see that there is still an inherent value to them?
Oh, they have more value than ever before because educators, librarians, teachers, parents, they all are recognizing now that comics are a great vehicle to tell a story, that they can be sort of a bridge for your so-called reluctant reader, you know, a great sort of entry point into more advanced reading. And they're a great way to teach writing to kids, you know, because Judd used a phrase earlier, beginning, a middle, and an end. I mean, you know, a comic strip, like the classic Garfield comic strips that Judd was talking about earlier, were 3 panels long, beginning, middle, end, bang, bang, bang. And it's, you know, when my kids were young in elementary school, their school had sort of a formula for teaching writing, which was somebody wanted but so. Somebody wanted something to happen, but then this thing happened, you know, so, you know, and that's how they sort of prompted the kids to sort of work their way through a story. You can do the same thing with comics, you know, where it's like, hey, you know, here's 4 empty panels. See if you can fill them up with a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I used to play a game with kids when I would do cartoon workshops where I would give them little prompts. I'd give them like an individual, an object, and a sound effect, like lumberjack, swimming pool, blam. Okay, tell a comic strip with those 3 elements, and it's fun. And so comics, I think comics have more going for them now than they ever did when I was growing up. I mean, more people saw comics in newspapers back then, but way more people are seeing comics in all sorts of other formats now.
That's a good point. Judd, what do you think as far as you've worked for, you know, on television productions, animation and other things? Do you, you know, outside of this, do you see a disconnect between the comics that are being created and the productions, or do you think that there's a connection there?
No, I think, well, a couple of things. I think I wrote superhero comics for over 10 years, and there was always a discussion anytime, you know, is with a new Batman movie's coming out. Well, I guess you know, you guys will sell more comic books, and that was never the case. When the movies came out, they never moved any more comics, but it's different now. Things have changed. Cartoons are a little more ubiquitous and out there than they used to be. I mean, as Lincoln said, it used to be when newspapers were more the mainstay. Everybody had a daily dose of cartoons in their life. 3 to 4 pages of funnies, the comic strips, delivered to your house or at your newsstand every single day. But now that people are reading newspapers a lot less and seeking out, not getting their comic strips going to their door, I think their kids and people in general dig cartoons. They always have. There's something really just captivating about cartoons, drawings with words and pictures. And I think with that is why we've seen a greater boom in all ages comics and graphic novels. Kids aren't getting that daily dose of cartoon from comic strips the way they used to on a daily basis. So now there's these other forms. And as far as with that, in conjunction with the fact that superhero comics have exploded on movies and television, I think it's created this kind of synergy that just, puts cartoons more in the zeitgeist. I mean, I'm sure Lincoln gets this question all the time. I mean, we're cartoonists. We make up stories when we draw them. And the third question we get asked is, when are they going to make it into a TV show or a movie? And, our answer is always like, we'll see. For now, they're on paper and they're in books and they're in newspapers, and we love that. But the natural progression is like, yeah, let's see it take on a different medium already. Let's go. So I think they're great for those reluctant readers. I think they're more out there for the general public more so than ever before. And these are good things.
Right. And I think we'd all agree that librarians, the bookshop owners, they have helped propel this.
Champions. Yes. Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Exactly.
Yes.
And, great. Well, the books are Lincoln Peirce has Max the Midknights, Battle of the Bodkins, and Judd Winick's Gina, the Girl Who Broke the World. And thank you both for your great insight. I'll hand it back over to our host.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank
you so much.
John, thank you. I just want to, I know we said in the comments, and I want to apologize to the three of you as well. We're so sorry for the vulgar commentator. We banned them as soon as we found them. But we are not going to let that make this event end on a negative note, nor sully the awesome experience that we've gotten to have in celebrating your books. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us this Friday night. I really, really appreciate it. John, you had so many great questions too. The audience as well. You guys had phenomenal questions. Everyone, go check out the newest Max and the newest Hilo, as well as Max Meow. I'm having to say this all slowly, otherwise it will all become like one tongue twister of Max Meow, and Gina. I'm just going to say Gina because I won't tongue twist that. But I think reluctant readers, too, is a great thing. If you have any reluctant readers in your life, all these books are really great options we've seen in the store in particular. Like, kids just love these books. So thank you so very much for joining us, everyone. And we will see you all the next time. Have a beautiful evening and a wonderful weekend, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Be safe and be well. Y'all take care.